All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the May budget workshop, quarterly workshop. Budget will be a big portion of this workshop. Particularly, we're in the last month, the month of graduation, so this happened rather quickly. We are going to start off with our staff presentation and hand it off to Ms. Mindy Petty.
Hey, how are you? I'm Mindy Petty. I get the privilege of leading all the nurses in the district and sharing the shack. So for those of you that may or may not know what the shack is, it's our school health advisory council, and they are obligated each year to update the board based on the participation of its members and relations to all things student health. So we make yearly recommendations when it comes to student health. So we are required to have 4 meetings per year. Those meetings have to be recorded and uploaded to our website along with our agenda and minutes. There was one particular meeting that was not recorded because that would be user error of recording. So there you go. We are comprised of 25 voting members. The majority of our members need to be parents within our district, but we also have community members, and we have some GISD staff/parents as well. It's really important for us on the shack to have an equal representation between ECU feeder pattern and GHS feeder pattern, and we've been very successful in the last couple of years. In addition to our annual updates, we have subcommittee updates and our district advisors for the district. We have Paige Holland with PE, Health and Science, Jason Dean, he's with Athletics, Shelby Edmondson with Medical Health. Everybody knows the famous Dave Rainey, who does mental health. And then Terry Baylog is our nutritionist for the district, and she's our nutrition district advisor. Our annual updates for this year, we plan on doing the Tucker's Law House Bill 3908. And then we also are going to update you on a substance use prevention curriculum, and then our advisory. So, we have House Bill 3908, which is Tucker's Law, which requires a shack to make sure that we are giving the requirement of the board to do the appropriate grade levels that we're going to have this sentinel education and appropriate curriculum. Prior to Tucker's Law going into effect, we, in 2022 and 2023, we were already working on this. GISD had already said that that was an important thing for us to be doing. And so we actually had already partnered with the National Guard, and they spoke to all of our secondary campuses. And they showed a video called Dead on Arrival, which was produced by a group of parents that have been affected individually, called Stop the Void. So then in the 23-24 school year, once Tucker's Law came into legislation, we continued to have Stop the Void come to our high schools, and our fentanyl fathers come to our secondary school. And they, those presentations there was a big success. We were really proud of them. We also partnered with the National Guard and Drug Task Force Agency to come to 2 of our elementaries. It was kind of our pilot program. And the thought was they were going to come give their presentation and bring helicopters, because what elementary school does not want to see a little helicopter on campus? Unfortunately, the rain canceled that particular idea, but they did come out and talk to them. Moving forward, the shack would like to advise the board that we would like to continue bringing outside speakers. So it was really important for the shack to get student voice in this, because who are we talking to? We're talking to our students. And so we surveyed a small group at GHS and ECU High School of what they wanted from these presentations. And really what they wanted is they loved having people that were impacted by fentanyl overdoses and fentanyl addiction. And they actually would even like to hear from maybe students that have been affected by this. And so they love the actual in-person presentations. It really meant a lot to them. And then our other recommendation or advisement for the board would be we would like to expand the National Guard DA helicopter event for all elementary schools, for all 4th and 5th graders. And then the helicopters will hopefully be able to come back, and we could actually make that happen this year, depending on weather. So those would be our advisements to meet Tucker's Law. Okay, and then, so that was what we were required to do. But as a district and as a shack, we felt that it was really important for us to consider the K through 12 approach to substance use prevention for all substances, not just fentanyl. we know that there's a fentanyl crisis in America. We want to make sure we're making do everything we can to meet the law, but we also need to look at all of the other things that students are exposed to. So that brings us to our next slide. The SHAC reviewed TEA-approved prevention curriculums, and they went through a whole vetting process. They looked at all 5, they chose 3, then they had in-person vendors to those 3, and then they wanted to make a recommendation for one. And so the SHAC would like to recommend, so in our K through 5, there isn't any requirement that we teach any of the actual substance prevention, but we feel like it's important. So we are meeting that through health teams. We're teaching healthy relationships, stress management, developing a trusting relationship with adults. Like we're doing those things in the health teams, and so we feel like we're meeting that in K through 5. Not to mention for 4th and 5th grade, we'll have the health doctors and stuff come in. But we wanted a comprehensive approach. And so the SHAC ultimately picked the curriculum called All-Stars Core. All-Stars focuses on finding that one adult, whether it be a parent, a teacher, a nurse, a counselor, one adult that you can go talk to when you're faced with these difficult decisions, right? They really focus on what that would look like if you were approached with maybe having somebody offering drugs or doing any unhealthy activity, how you would navigate that and who you would get advice from. And we thought that that was a really good start. So we went ahead and recommended that for All-Stars 6th grade. And then that would be taught in PE and pre-athletics. We got with Paige, who's in charge of PE health curriculum, and Jason Dean, who's in charge of pre-athletics. And he thought that both of them thought that would fit really well into their coaches' lessons. And so it would reach all 6th graders, which was great because we were trying to figure out how to reach them, all students. And then they recommend All-Star Seniors, which goes a little more in depth. It's a high school level class for everyone in health class to be, review health relationships and making good choices and all of the things that happen. So that would be the recommendation for that. In addition to the annual recommendations, there's subcommittee work. I want to just preface this with nutrition had a main subcommittee last year that had to give a triannual assessment on our wellness plan. So nobody really was part of the nutrition committee this year. And then Paige, who's in charge of PE, Health and Science, she really helped spearheaded all the curriculum content that we presented to the SHAC for substance abuse. So there wasn't really subcommittees for those particular 2. But we'll go into mental health. They wanted to focus on the priority area, student well-being. Both of our advisors in the committees this year really wanted to focus on that particular priority area. We want kids in school, we know that. And so the SHAC started talking about things, what is student well-being? What does that mean? It's such a huge and wide encompassing word. And so they wanted to kind of focus on what does the student and family need and what's the best place for them to get. So our counseling resources services did a resource map. It walks you through recognizing a need of a student, what the actual school resources we have and what we can do, and then how to connect students outside of our resources here, how to connect them to outside resources. And so they went ahead and made that map, which has been amazing. Also fitting into that, they wanted to know where does GISD mentoring fit in the resource mapping model. They wanted to figure out how does that fit in as an additional resource for us. And so that's really where they were diving in on this particular SHAC here, is about mentoring. So in that conversation about mentoring and diving in and figuring it out, we realized that there was a gap of how many mentors we have and how many mentees we have, and what could be the reason that we have a gap between the number of mentors and mentees. And so there were some perceived obstacles and recommendations. One of the perceived obstacles possibly could be the physical consent form. They send those home in the Tuesday folders. If you're a parent in GISD, you know that things can go missing from a Tuesday folder, right? Like, we just know that. And so we thought that possibly we could add mentor permission forms to the annual Skyward process, and that make it a more streamlined approach that every parent then would see a permission form to see if they wanted to have their student be mentored. And then we also wanted to talk about what the perception of mentees are. I can tell you, when I'm a parent in the district, before I came into GISD, when I looked at a mentor program, I told my kids, you have me and your dad for parents, like, you don't need a mentor. But coming in and seeing it in real time and seeing kids, we really think that mentoring is for everyone. All of us at some point have been mentees or mentors, hopefully, and every child can benefit. So we thought rebranding and making it a district-wide branding, that mentoring is for all students. In addition to that, we use a system called Relatrix, which is, that's all of our volunteers and mentors. Mentors submit a form, it's just a paper form, and then that's how they get approved to be mentors. But there's a lot of logistics and complexity to deter users. And so at a district level, Relatrix should still be central office level, but we were thinking of a more accessible software that could increase matching mentors and mentees, and because we also in that discussion realized there's a lot of different reasons to want to be mentored. It could be that you're having problems in school, it could be a relational issue, it could be behavioral, you want to learn more about some higher academics. There's lots of different ways a child needs to be mentored. And so we were thinking that we differentiate mentoring to mirror the student needs. We also know that pairing a mentee with a mentor takes a lot of trust. That's a trusting relationship. Parents are giving their babies to these people that are mentoring that school, and they need to make sure there's that trust built, and not just between the parent and the school system, but between the mentee and the mentor. In our current system, the mentors just submit a paper saying what they can mentor with, right? But it's not really about developing relationships at that point, it's once you're already paired. And so what we're recommending is that we provide an opportunity for relationship development between the campuses and the potential mentors. They could come in, they could speak to potential mentees, they could find where that relationship fits best for them, and connections, because I may connect to you more than I would connect to her, right? Like every relationship's different. So we feel like we want the mentees and the mentors to get the most out of this process. And then one of the other perceived possible obstacles is that the group primarily responsible for, once they're paired, is counseling services. And we know that right now we're in education, there's limited resources, limited time, we're all being asked to do more things, and so maybe look at it from a campus-wide approach. Like, it shouldn't just be the counselor saying, this child could be, have a mentor. It could be, I'm a teacher, hey, I see this kid could really benefit from talking to somebody else. So like, do it as a campus-wide approach that everyone's identifying students that could possibly want or need mentors. Okay? And then again, I kind of already touched on this. Like, we realize that all this takes work and time. And that it's not just one department's sole job, right? We all have things on top of that. And so we agree that the program needs to look outside of maybe our district or outside of just one department kind of taking on this additional role, but more devoting resources to just this particular subject. And so what the SHAC believes is that we really do need a functioning mentor program, and we would like to decrease the gap between mentors and mentees. And the mental health subcommittee did ask, or they would like to advise the board to delegate additional resources, and then have clearly defined objectives to make it part of our 24-25 district improvement plan. But what I can tell you is while all this work was being done, separate, we do actually have a committee that's going to be working and focusing just on mentorship and what are the possible reasons we have this gap in mentors versus mentees. And so I'm really excited about that work. And we will share with the SHAC members that actually has come into place. So we're really happy about that. Moving on to medical health. This is more my forte. So again, they wanted to align with our strategic direction on student well-being. And so they really wanted to focus on what could we do to help decrease the first day exclusions from school, And how can we help to provide resources for families in a difficult time of just all this stuff navigating. So we went ahead and the medical health committee wanted to focus on 2 areas, an annual back-to-school vaccine clinic and an annual fall and flu COVID-19 clinic for staff and students. So to give you a little backstory, DISHES, which is the Department of Health Services, it's mandated that we meet vaccination requirements, okay, K through 12. And if not, we have first day exclusions. We don't want our kids to be excluded from school, like we want them in school. And so we were trying to navigate what can we do to help kids get their immunizations, have an additional resource to do so we can have no exclusions on the first day of school. And then in addition, yearly, we do provide a flu and COVID-19 vaccine clinic for staff. We had gone away from it for students just because there's a lot of logistics and little kids who don't want to get shots and all the things. But our shack, we have a lot of doctors on our shack, and they felt it's really important to provide this resource. So, obstacles, we're just trying to figure out who could give the vaccines, the personnel to do it, where the location would be, all those things. But we are happy to tell you that we are going to have our first annual back-to-school vaccine clinic on July 20th here at Hammerlin. We've worked out with Williamson County's health district and Aurora Concepts. They are going to provide immunizations to all of our students free of cost.
Wow.
So regardless of if the student has insurance, doesn't have insurance, doesn't matter. All of those will be covered, and we are pushing it out through, working with communications to find out how we can get parents bought in. But we are really excited because we're really thinking this is going to help all those students that come the first day that are not compliant with vaccinations. We are continuing, even though SHAC is over for the school year, we are continuing to find a way to have a student and staff flu and COVID-19 vaccination clinic in the fall as well. But we think this is like a great opportunity for our students and our families and GISD to support them. Again, there's nobody on nutrition this year. There was no one on PE, health and science. And then that is the conclusion of mine. So questions?
Thank you. Yeah, especially about the mentors.
Yeah, it's exciting work.
We had such a great program at one point, and with COVID and everything, and so many changes. And I know I've been a reading volunteer for 2 little kiddos for 2 years, but I'm really more of a mentor. So thank you.
I think our district's doing exciting stuff to increase that mentoring program and grow it and build it. And I love the rebranding of it. I think it'll help all students.
I want to give some credit to Lindsay Harris and Heather Stoner as well. They're taking on expanding mentoring and tutoring support in our schools from the community. So I'm excited about the direction that can go.
I wanted to ask about the cost. When you're going back and looking at the prevention curriculums and those kind of things. Is this a local cost, or is there a state grant, or how is all of this funded?
So there is a cost. They went ahead and picked the minimal amount of cost that it would be, but it's a very doable cost within our current budget.
It's nice to use some title money.
Yeah, title money for supplies. So that was something that we worked really closely with Paige on, is making sure that we weren't putting any financial burden on the district, because we all know school.
I didn't know if there was also some state grant. I would think that would be something that there would be some readily available state grants, but maybe not.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for being this less nerve-wracking.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mindy Petty and Heather Stoner. Well done. So we are going to transition into talking about the budget. Before we start discussing this, I just want to make it clear the intent of this presentation is to be as transparent and straightforward with you as possible, so you feel well informed as trustees leading into any action taken at the May board meeting, which will be That being stated, there is nothing about funding in public education that is straightforward right now. Over 80% of the school districts in Texas are operating at a deficit budget, and Georgetown ISD is no exception. At the same time, while we were trying to reduce that budget deficit, we have the competing interest of trying to keep up with cost of living for our employees. So needing to increase compensation while reducing the budget deficit are two competing priorities that have to be reconciled through the hard work of the people in this room. Today we're going to talk about the budget updates with my teammates here, CFO Jennifer Hanna, and our Executive Director of Human Resources, Amanda Johnson. We're also going to talk about compensation. Before I get into this, you're going to hear me talk about this a couple times, but I'm very grateful to our community for supporting, based on preliminary results, all 4 propositions. We are excited for the future of Georgetown and what the future looks like in terms of our facilities and our learning experiences. I can honestly say that every single person in this room played an important part in helping communicate the importance of these 4 propositions. And I want to bring particular attention to Ms. Melinda Brazier, who helped just organize a great campaign and communicate with different community members, and Michelle Mines as well, who just kept me sane. And we will revisit the bond here towards the end of this presentation as well. I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Hanna. Sorry, Ms. Hanna. Before she gets into this, I do believe it's important to note that nothing about bond funds can be used to make up for our operating expenses. So how schools are funded are completely, in terms of what it takes to operate a school district, is completely different from funds that can come from a school fund. Those all have to be used for facilities, technology, athletics, fine arts, the things that are listed in those 4 propositions.
Good morning. Yes, as Dr. Padilla has said, we do obviously have good news on the bond passing. However, we cannot pay for our teacher salaries or our utilities or any of the resources that we use to serve our students with those funds. So just to kind of reframe our 24-25 budget priorities, we've been working with these priorities since January. All our decisions have been student-centered and on learning, growth, and progress. We have looked to increase teacher and staff compensation. We know from the demographer that we have enrollment growth that we're planning for, and we are opening 3 new campuses in the fall. We're opening San Gabriel Elementary, Reed Old Middle School, Future Ready Complex, and at the same time, we've been working to reduce the deficit by finding efficiencies. So we do have a history of strong financial management in Georgetown ISD. I'll just go through a few of the things that for current and future our budget efforts. Maintaining high bond ratings is very important. That gives us a lower interest rate when we borrow money, which in turn saves the taxpayers money. We have an A rating with TEA's Financial Integrity System rating system of Texas. So we've maintained an A, the highest rating for that. We have maintained a sustainable fund balance to continue operating the school district. We have worked on developing strategies to ensure efficient use of our funds and also provide staffing and resources to meet our objectives, our strategic objectives. And we are finding ways to continue increasing compensation in a very competitive market. So just a few things to talk about. So we've had no additional state funding, as we've talked about. There was $32.7 billion at the start of the last legislative session in the state surplus. And there was $18.29 billion left at the end of the last legislative session. And there is $23.77 billion in the rainy day fund. So it is very frustrating and unfortunate that we have not received any additional funding for state, for public education since 2019. At the same time, since 2019, we are dealing with double-digit inflation. These are a few of our commodities: fuel, construction, insurance, utilities. All of these have increased while the base allotment has stayed the same. Additionally, we have some costs that we have factored in for the 24-25 budget. We were recently notified that we are getting a decrease in the amount of reimbursement that we get for our student health and related services. Those are services that we provide to our special education students, and we are reimbursed by Medicaid. However, they've lowered that reimbursement amount, even though we will continue to provide those services to our students. So that has been a recent hit to our 24-25 budget. Opening the 3 new campuses, we're approximating $2.5 million for the cost for that increase in the fall. TEA has mandated that we have school marshals at every school. We are looking at $600,000 to provide that. And we have been informed that our property insurance premiums will be increasing due to weather-related perils throughout the state. So not necessarily that Georgetown has had some high claims. However, statewide, they are seeing a lot of claims, and so therefore our premiums will be increasing next year. I know many of us have seen that in our own personal insurance as well. It's no different than that with the district. So some steps that we've taken to reduce the budget deficit so far. We have made reductions of central office and support positions. We have increased the high school and the middle school class size for our staffing formula. Still maintaining lower class sizes than surrounding districts, however, we've gone up from prior years. We have decreased department on payroll budgets. We have worked to increase attendance, which will increase our funding because we are funded on attendance, not on enrollment. And we are still considering expenditure reductions. This budget is fluid. We are still looking and evaluating positions very carefully and to look for more efficient ways to provide the same services to our students with fewer staff. So just to kind of go over a few things, this chart shows what we have used for our enrollment, for our revenue projections. We use a very conservative model. So the blue is the enrollment that is actually used for the budget, and then the orange is the demographer projection. So in 23-24, the demographer projected 13,703 students, and we used 13,500 in our revenue projection. We actually are at 13,452 students, give or take. 13,520 students actually is our latest. Yeah. So we did that for 23-24. We're using the same conservative model for 24-25. The demographer has projected 13,943. We are using 13,743. 200 students lower in 24-25. And then for 25-26, which is 2 years out, even further out, we decided that it would be best to be even more conservative, and so we've actually used 300 students less. Because we don't know with charter schools opening, with interest rates, we don't know how that, and multifamily being built, we're not sure how that's going to actually affect our enrollment.
Another aspect of this that's important to note is, you may have questions about why are we using numbers or enrollment of students that is under the demographer projection. The tighter and tighter our fund balance gets, the more conservative and careful we want to be about not overestimating enrollment, because if we do overestimate, that puts us in a situation in the middle of the year where it's even toughest.
So this next graph also shows kind of a 10-year comparison of what we've projected to where we've actually ended up for fund balance. So the blue is our projected, and then orange is our actual. So we have ended better than we said we would from the past 8 of 10 years. So that's what this graph represents.
The exception being the COVID year.
Okay, so this brings us to where we are currently with our updated 2024-25 general fund budget. You'll see at the top, we are projecting 2 possible compensation increases for staff. On the left-hand side is a 3.5% for teachers and a 2% for all other staff. Then on the right-hand side is a 3% for teachers and 2% for all other staff. And I will draw your attention if you go down to the line near the bottom that says excess deficit fund balance. The second column for the 3.5 to 2% teacher increase, that is giving us a projected deficit of $4.9 million. If we use our conservative numbers to project 25-26, without knowing what increases we would have based on staffing or other inflation, we would be at a $1.8 million deficit. And that also doesn't include any of the budget work that we will continue to find.
Jennifer, I'm not following you in the chart, so can you help me get to where you are on the
So
chart?
I'm on the second column.
Right here.
About 2/3 of the way down.
Okay,
She's referring to these two numbers here. This is
okay,
based on 3.5. This would be the deficit that we would work with for next year's budget, and 2 years from now would be the 1.8.
okay, thank you.
And then the next 2 columns are if we did a 3% and a 2%.
I have a quick question. Can you just help me understand why the deficit would be so significantly less in 2 years versus next year? It's like a $3 million difference. How does that happen?
The growth of the students, so we would be getting more revenue.
Okay.
And so we haven't factored in any
So we're
expenditures.
increasing them without the revenue of the students
Right. so-
next year, in 2 years.
Right. So,
Jennifer, correct me if I'm off in how I'm putting this, but we do have growth of students this year, but we have an increase in overhead expenses this year, the opening of 2 different campuses, minus the new and old, and adding school marshals. And so that takes all the benefit of growth and kind of neutralizes it. Here, it's pure benefit of growth, and in a very conservative estimate. Correct?
that is correct. So if I'd like to talk about some major assumptions that we've used.
So I'm going to talk about the first 2 major assumptions, which is, that first one is the basic allotment has not changed since 2019. And the basic allotment from the state minus any other additional federal funding is $6,160 per student. If you adjusted for inflation, which would be $1,000 to $7,160, it would be a difference of or an addition of $12.6 million to the district revenue. So I don't have to do the math for you. That would close the deficit. That would give us the funds to increase compensation for our staff to keep up with cost of living just by itself. And I'm going to let Jennifer talk about the other bullets here.
Right, so I just wanted to talk about some of the other assumptions that we've used. We received our preliminary certified values from the Williamson Central Appraisal District at the end of April. And there is a 10.9% growth over last year. So our, before any frozen values, our values at 22.7 billion. And this includes the $100,000 homestead exemption from Senate Bill 2 from the last legislative session. And if you go to the next bullet, we do here in Georgetown have a large frozen tax rate population, which is the over 65. And Senate Bill 12, also from the prior legislative session, lowered those rates. Some of our homeowners actually went down to zero because they took 4 years of tax compression that taxpayers had been receiving and gave them in 1 year. We will have a little compression again this year, but not as much as we had last year because they made up 4 years worth of compression. So then if you go to the next bullet, I think we've talked about this, we are using an enrollment of 13,743 to base our revenue projections on instead of 13,943. And again, we're using a lower ADA. Our attendance is at 94%. However, we're using 92%. That is adjusted down for pre-K, which we don't get full funding for, and other adjustments that come in. So those are our major assumptions this year going into the
So just to clarify, that second one really is just kind of an observation, not really an assumption. We're doing the numbers based on the allotment not changing.
That's correct.
We just wanted to show that that would be such a significant.
If there was going to be an increase, it would have to be next legislative session, right?
That's correct.
Any traction on that?
There's no telling.
No crystal ball?
I don't think it was one of the priorities. So it was not one of the priorities, and it's not this on the list.
You know, by just watching the news and public education and looking at how many deficit budgets out there, the tough measures that many districts are taking, it would be hard to believe that the state would not engage in that conversation in the 2025 legislative session. But of course, we wouldn't see any benefits of those actions until the 25-26 school year. So the 24-25 school year, it is what it is right now.
I have a question, it's about the SHARs. Where is that decision made that they're cutting reimbursement? Is that federal or state?
It's, I believe it's state.
Federal.
Is it
Federal level.
It's federal and it's administered by the Health and Human Services Department.
Yeah, because we always really counted on that to help offset.
That used to be like a very solid number because it's also in arrears, so that
Yeah.
it's from 2 years is we have
Right.
the lag. So typically that is a very
So the feds have decided to reduce the
percentage.
It's also worth noting that SHAR's reduction, in addition to property insurance going up, in addition to health premiums going up, all of those things aren't being discovered until the middle of the school year. And so it's to say that school funding and forecasting has been a volatile exercise is probably an understatement. We're having to constantly real time make adjustments based upon the work. But at this point, we feel relatively certain that what we're dealing with is what we're dealing with and what we're showing you tonight.
Yes.
Was there a push at all for the $1,000 that you mentioned here? Was there a push at all in the last legislative session that just didn't pass? I don't remember hearing anything, but was there a group, was there some legislators that were really working towards that?
Yes, ma'am. I would have to quote the exact bill, but there were different lobbyists that were painting the picture of what inflation has done. The bill that went forward in the House was not near $1,000, but it was something, and that bill died.
Wasn't most of it tied to vouchers? We're going to give public schools more money, we also do vouchers?
Yes, ma'am. Every bill was tied to vouchers. So, as we move forward, it is worth noting that other than student enrollment or ADA going up, the only way to balance this budget is to reduce expenditures through staffing and budgeting. And even if ADA goes up and enrollment goes up, it'll still never quite be enough to get us to zero unless we do some other tough things in what expenditures are looking like. So a couple other possible benefits to us that we are not budgeting on, but it's worth putting out there so we know about them and take action on them to the greatest degree possible is these are other opportunities to increase revenue. If 100 more students enrolled based upon what we built in here, that would be a funding increase of anywhere from $600,000 to $930,000, depending on how many of those students are secondary versus elementary. An increase of student attendance of 1% based upon what we've currently built in would be an increase of $848,000 in revenue. We are also in real time having conversations about increasing facility rental fees. That will be such a seismic increase in revenue, but it is significant. And then an unknown quantity is how do we continue to talk about staffing efficiencies while remaining true to who we are and the student experiences that we want to give every learner as they go through Georgetown ISD. One of the next steps I want to inform you about is, and we will engage the trustees on possible nominations and go through a process of talking about this publicly, but pulling together a budget and compensation task force to address the very real problem and possible solutions and recommendations with the community. So that budget and compensation task force would come together to really have a good understanding of where we are right now and also discuss the data as we go along the school year.
Can I stop right quick and make a comment back here? We go back to that. You know, we don't always think about the impact of what charters do and what the voucher system does financially. But pulling kids from our community, there is a significant financial impact when you look at the difference that 100 kids make. So it's something I don't think we don't talk about it very much, and I don't know how cognizant we are. But seeing numbers like that makes it feel real.
Yes, ma'am, and I believe in our schools here in Georgetown, I believe in our principals, and I think we need to continue to amp up the effort to tell our story and talk about how in an era of school choice, how the Georgetown ISD schools are an excellent choice to raising our young people to discover their purpose through just the guidance of great adults and the learning experiences we design. Okay, so in 2022, the board defined these budget board parameters or assurances, and this helped really provide us as a school district and as leadership some guidelines for how do we attack this problem. And given that the context has really changed, based upon where we are, I really feel like this is a great opportunity to engage you trustees in a conversation about, are these still the parameters we want to work with? And are there different charges that we should be really thinking about in order to address this very real problem? So I know you can read, but I'm going to read these to you. The first was prioritize program reductions to be within the district's mission, vision, and strategic direction. The second is open and timely communication with all stakeholders in the budget process. Gather input into potential program and budget changes. Pursue efficiency within district educational goals. Investigate potential revenue sources. If necessary, utilize attrition as the primary means of position reduction. And then, as we are doing today, provide regular board updates on the process. So trustees, I want to ask for your input, your questions as we look at possibly revising this.
Well, I think the urgency is drastically changed since 2 years ago. And I think the reality is tough decisions are gonna have to be made. And that includes aligning our priorities to still meet the things that are most critical to people in this room, the kids in our classrooms. So it's gonna have to be a willingness for people to engage in a conversation that none of us really want to be having at this point.
Yes, sir, thank you.
I mean, so much of it is circumstances outside of our control, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, we've got to work with what we've got. And so, you know, and we've known, the writing's been on the wall for a few years now, you know, one deficit budget after another, which nobody in this community wants. But, you know, now's the time to really figure out how are we going to get out of this hole.
When we say now is the time to figure out how we want to get out of this hole, you know, one of the key words on here that has really been tough to work through is the whole idea of using attrition. And so there are some times where we have to reduce an actual role. And you know, we always say no one is going to lose their job. But there are some instances where people are losing their position because of the need to reduce the budget. When 84% of our budget is people, being able to make that budget leaner, it does have an impact on our employees, even if everyone stays employed. So I just want to talk to you as trustees about the way I said that. Does that resonate with you? Do you have guidance?
Yeah, absolutely, because that's something we can't lose sight of. It's what's important to us as a district is this culture. And so we've got to cut weight, but we have to do it smartly. There's easy ways to shed pounds, but it may not be in the long run healthy, and that's what we've got to keep in mind. And I do not envy you that job in any way, shape, or form to keep that balance where we've got to find, you know, excess dollars in the budget and get those cut in order to get us back balanced, but not cut to the point that we're anorexic or bulimic. We can't lose sight of the long-term health and keeping those things that are important to us as a district front of mind. Where else can we cut, but, you know, hold true to our culture that we've worked very hard to build?
I believe in 2012, we actually did do a big cut. It was like over 100, it was over 100 positions were. It was,
But correct me if I'm wrong here, are we talking cutting or are we talking reassigning?
Reassigning.
Okay.
right.
Well, I'm just talking about overall.
Sure. I just
Yeah.
want to be careful using the word cut because that's not our.
No, I said
Cutting
2012.
budget,
That's
yeah,
right.
cutting
Yes.
people, yes.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, there you cut
Yeah.
budget by
I
cut.
was retired by then, I'm not at fault.
Yeah.
But the point of your statement is that it was a painful process.
Yeah.
Very,
Absolutely.
And our desire at this point is what, or your desire, to avoid having to repeat that?
yeah, if possible, yeah.
And, you know, depending on the 2025 legislature is not something we have the luxury of depending on. And so making the necessary decisions now to avoid another 2012 is one of the things that we continue to wrestle with the leaders in this district. Were you going to say something, Mr. Herb? Is there something else?
No, they clarified my question.
I feel like, you know, as all the leaders in this room, as we talk about it, when we talk about that culture, we all know there is something special about working and serving in Georgetown ISD. I mean, it's one of our best recruitment and retention aspects there's something very different about serving the kids here and getting great teammates that you can depend on. So from your perspective as trustees, when we talk about these arguably painful decisions that we have to work through and being intentional about protecting that culture, I'll just give you a sentence that culture of, what would you describe that as we think about students primarily?
To me, it's a culture of making sure we're preparing all students for whatever life brings their way. And there's no one single definition, but we've got it, when we're looking at maybe programs, for example, the kind of the cost benefit analysis, there may be a very expensive program out there, and we can save some dollars by getting rid of it, because the benefit it's providing the student and preparing for, you know, maybe something other than college, that it would be too costly to cut back.
It's very helpful, thank you for saying that.
I think it's a culture of taking care of all students.
It's a culture of community. You know, it's, not only are the teachers raising our kids in the schools, but we see them in the community. You know, this is such a small town still, even though it's growing, and it's still felt.
Absolutely. I think I often tell people there's no other district I've been able to serve in where the community is as connected to the school district as they are in Georgetown. So that's a special thing that we want to look at. Mr. Mike?
I believe it's a culture of setting all students up for success, regardless of what success looks like for that student. Right? Not one particular cookie cutter path. Kind of piggyback on Elizabeth's point. There is a lot of success can look different to a lot of different students. And we want to keep that in mind as we're creating an environment where kids are learning, but also know that there are going to be a lot of different paths that they take very shortly in life.
So this is all very helpful, thank you so much. Any other input on when we talk about a culture of
What came to my mind was a culture of community and collaboration for the benefit of all students. We've always been very good about not having silos and just working across programs, working across nonprofits, everything. The community is out there ready to step up.
Okay, thank you all for your input, and as you know, this will be
I would say,
going conversation.
that culture, I think the board and us as a community at some point need to have a discussion about advocacy, because while we can implement some near-term solutions, we don't have the power to make long-term solutions without the state getting involved and doing their part and acknowledging the gaps that they're creating. So I think at some point advocacy has to become a much bigger role of what we're doing, and that has to get integrated into our community. Like, we as board members can put an amount of pressure on elected officials, and we're willing and happy to do that. But the more voices that are willing to do that, we have 80% of the districts in the state at a deficit. That voice should be strong at this point. There's some reason it's disjointed, disconnected, and that we're not having an impact with state representatives, legislation. So it's really frustrating that we're being limited and having to make decisions that impact our kids because their willingness to act, their unwillingness to act. So I don't know, somehow we're going to start having advocacy conversations that we, I think, historically have stayed away from.
It doesn't have to be us, we can encourage.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
maybe there could be a lot of ways that unfolds,
Awareness,
for
community
sure.
awareness, absolutely.
But the long-term solution is not to be made in this room.
And I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Chair, because that community awareness is going to be critically important. And in all of the things that we're talking about, I mean, Georgetown, even prior to Devon being a thought in Georgetown, who has been a fiscally conservative school district that has been good financial stewards of taxpayer money. And there is nothing about our budget that has been, reckless spending or overspending. It's just strictly a matter of inflation and compensation running counter to an old funding mechanism that isn't moving with inflation. All right, thank you for this conversation. I'm going to move forward to Amanda Johnson.
All right, so despite the issues with budget and the challenges that we faced with our conversations about what to do with staff, we've continued to keep strategic priority area 3 in the forefront in talking about teacher and staff compensation. And so with that, recommendation number 1 for consideration that we'd really like to bring forward is a 3.5% increase for a teacher pay scale. That would bring our starting salary to $56,500. You may remember a couple of budget workshops back, we talked about where our current starting teacher pay is falls in the bottom third of surrounding districts. And so this particular recommendation would put us in the top third. You know, other districts around us are considering pay increases as well. We still feel confident that this would help bump us up to an area that we haven't been in the past. And then consideration of 2% increase at midpoint for the other pay groups that are listed below. Recommendation number 2 does include, we mentioned this last time, we still want to make sure that our teachers that are taking care of our high needs kids are taken care of. This has been a challenge for us in the last few years to fill these roles, and so we're hoping that increasing these stipends would make us competitive with our surrounding districts. Recommendation 3 has to do with our starting salaries for hourly employees. So currently our instructional aides in the classroom are at $15.50. We'd like to bump that to $16 an hour. And then all other hourly staff are currently at $15, and we'd like to bump that to $15.50. And then this is just kind of an overall, just kind of bird's eye view of what this would cost, broken out in those different categories. So you can see that the largest cost tiers for our teachers and librarians, and then you can see the rest how that falls for a total of roughly $3.4 million.
And that's already included in this budget you showed.
That is correct.
That's right.
Just to make sure that's not an additional $3
No.
million.
Back to the side-by-side, that would be the one on the left. Do you guys have any questions or?
All right, so with our next steps, we are going to, in the May board meeting, be able to approve the 24-25 teacher and staff compensation plan. And then in June, we would approve the budget at June 17th board meeting. All right, move forward. Any other questions from our trustees?
I think maybe just one thing I want to say about the budget, because you mentioned, that before you even thought in Georgetown. This is something that has been just barreling down towards us regardless of your being our leader now. And so I just want to make sure that everybody understands that these are some tough decisions we as a board have to take ownership of and help him do what's right for our district. But I want to make sure that nobody is left with the impression that this is Devin showing up, doing it Devin's way. Even if Dr. Brent were still sitting there, we'd have this same exact conversation. So, thank you for showing up today.
Yeah.
How we can help you.
You're welcome.
Learn hard lessons the hard way.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. The inputs have changed
Exactly.
in terms of school finance. So you are correct. Anyone sitting in this chair would be working through the same conversation. And how we go about it is extremely important. It's as important as the end outcome.
Right, every district around us is now having the same conversation.
Yeah, every district, I don't want to name names, but when you look around, there are some districts, their budget deficit is arguably worse. And so, because of that good financial management for years here, it is not great. It is a problem that has to be dealt with, but there's a pathway forward for us.
A good question, since we're on budget, still on budget. One thing that we didn't really talk about is recapture. The recapture numbers are infuriating. If I remember this correctly, I think we're projected around to pay $21 million back in recapture
Next year.
So I want to ask if you've heard anything deeper about this. I found that Keller ISD, maybe I shouldn't say that specifically, there are multiple districts that said, we're not paying recapture. We're just not doing it. What I haven't heard, which was my initial instinct, is any district say, listen, you estimate that we owe 21 in recapture. We don't have that to pay you. We're not going to go into a $4 million deficit. But when we're at zero, we'll pay you the recapture that we feel that you feel is owed, right? So in our case, let's say instead of 21, we say, we don't have 21 to give you, we have 17. And our budget is at zero. Have you heard of any districts doing that? And has there been any sort of like catastrophic repercussions?
Yeah, I'll let Jennifer chime in. So catastrophic repercussions, yes, there are. And then, the other part is, so there are some districts that this year have said, we're not gonna pay it, and they eventually end up paying.
Paying.
That and more?
It doesn't work as a whole, so yes, there are catastrophic repercussions. Jennifer, anything you'd add?
Well, because TEA will put other restrictions or liabilities on the district that would hurt us in other ways, so they,
No, they hold it right
TEA,
back.
they have that power.
I saw they held the threat of that, but never kind of, but I hadn't really seen anything actually play out. Sometimes when I kind of wander across the street with my family and other families start to go, I say, they can't hit us all.
They will now.
Well, Anthony, I asked that very same question at the Central Texas School Board Association to an attorney.
Yeah,
Because it's 80% are,
Right.
what if we all
right.
over 1,000 districts didn't send their money back
And listen, my suggestion would never be don't pay your bills, but if you don't have it, you don't have it, you don't have it. I know if I owe somebody $1,000 and I say, I don't have it, but here's 700,
Yeah.
they gladly take the 700.
in? Yeah.
We don't have that kind of relationship.
And Anthony, I actually asked the question one time about, well, why don't we just not collect it? If we're having to give it back to the state, let's just reduce our overall property tax rate, and they told me
The
that that was also.
formula, that will get held against us. TEA sets our tax rate, so we have to charge that, or we'll have that gap from the funding.
We would love, instead of sending the $21 million we owe to the state next year, we would love to give it back to the taxpayers, which we're trying to see, but that is not an option for us as a school district, given the,
You know, you talk about community advocacy and just people being aware. I think the community as a whole generally understood, we have more than enough to cover the deficit. But we're giving back 4 to 5 times what the deficit is to the state. It just doesn't make sense.
To that point, the only other option would be increasing our tax rate, but when we did that, we would get an even larger portion.
Yep.
That's why we're asking the community to take on an even larger burden to fund the state, which already has an excess. And so that becomes the advocacy piece. It's ridiculous to have to charge more to our tax base and to our community to give more to the state to keep a smaller portion of what we're collecting to try to make it shortfalls when they're already sitting on a windfall.
I just have another question around that. This rainy day fund that the state, that the budget, like, what are the limitations to apply for some of that? I don't know how that works. Like, what's it for?
Jennifer.
Every year that the legislature is in session, that becomes part of something that they consider. But it's not a kind of process where you kind of put in your request or your piece of it. It goes through the legislative process. So it's sort of like their program, they can choose to either.
What are the steps to get access to some of that? Are there any?
There are.
The state just determines when they're going to give it out or not? You don't say, can I please have some?
No. We haven't asked that specific question, sir, so
Go on
but
down there.
there's a lot of more nots. I mean, in theory, the rainy day fund is for if there was some economic implosion,
Yeah.
that Texas would be able to fund everything they have in the budget.
But it's separately access in the general fund.
Right.
So that's the piece where the pickup is. But you have to have a large group, or an audience group, or be an influential donor, or a voice that can drive change in policy and legislation. And so that's why it's important to start getting more voices in the room.
Honestly, if nothing changes about school funding, the prospects of what the next 3 to 5 years look like in public education are arguably scary. And so I think we have a responsibility, as a district, to talk about this the same way we talk about the law. Because otherwise, it's hard to understand for just any taxpayer of why aren't property taxes funding schools?
Well, I think it's so interesting too, as a business person, to look at these numbers, and it feels like I just rode a roller coaster.
Yeah.
We just celebrated our bond,
Right.
then we talk about none of the money that we have, and then we ask for raises. It's like, I'm just sitting here. This all makes perfect sense. But it's just part of what we do.
front of all the board members an article that was in the Statesman last night about some stuff that's going on in the Houston area district and the rumble that's occurring, and because they're going through this process themselves, so we certainly are not a lone ranger. But I think, when you're getting down to the brass tacks of some of this stuff, the advocacy is going to start coming from the parents. And I'm really hoping that there's going to be some heat coming from this group from the Houston area. Because I just support what you're talking about, doing the task force, because I think the more that people understand where we are and what's going on, the greater acceptance and the degree that they're going to be willing to advocate for the school district is going to be much higher if they understand it. So they go for it.
Well, as we work through this, I just want to thank all of our district leaders for being partners in this conversation as we work through decisions we don't want to have to make. And to our staff, I just want to express that I regret that we are in a position that we have to make some very tough decisions in order to keep the district moving in the right direction. Hard right turn. I'm gonna. So on Saturday around 9 p.m., all the votes were in, and these are preliminary until they're canvassed by the Williamson County. But you can see that all 4 propositions passed. Just really proud of the effort. You can see Proposition A, 70% of the voting community voted for. On Proposition B, technology, 67%. Proposition C was fine arts, we had 63%. And so very excited for fine arts and athletics. Proposition D, 61%. I don't believe this is private information because it was in the all of the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee meetings, but in the Citizens Advisory Committee, we did the survey of the community, and we showed them the survey results. And the survey results have always been consistent with how the voters voted. So the survey, and they've never been wrong. And so the survey results told us that Proposition B, C, and D would struggle. Proposition B was going to be around maybe 50%, and Proposition C and D were going to be under 50%. And so for all 4 propositions to pass, I think speaks to the collective work of the people in this room to earn the community's trust. And I'm just very, constantly understanding that trust is fragile, and we have to continue to be transparent and earning people's trust as we communicate and go through the work of our school district. I also want to thank all of the members of our Citizens Advisory Committee. Those 80 members came together, they helped spread the word. So many people were volunteering their own time in the evenings, on the weekends, and just because they love Georgetown ISD and they want to see our kids thrive. So I start naming people, but I'd leave someone out, but I want to thank everyone who was on there. Any other questions regarding Dawn? Now the hard work happens, which is making good on our promises. Yes,
I
ma'am.
know the turnout was low, but looking at other districts in our area who are larger than we are, we had more voters.
Yes.
This is actually a large turnout for a May election.
This is very good.
A lot of very
This
steady.
is very good.
Yeah, we had really strong turnout, and we haven't looked at precinct by precinct analysis, but everything tells us that our friends in Sun City came out as strong supporters of all 4 propositions as well. We wouldn't see these kind of results if that were not the case. So very thankful for the connections we made in Sun City and all the support and engagement they have with our school district.
And I think I really appreciate the work that the community did as a whole to inform all of the voters and really get the vote out. And I think this shows that our community really supports our school district, is willing to take on debt because it's for the betterment of our students. But now we need to follow on and do that same community engagement and advocacy and explanation as to why, now that we're also passing the deficit budget at the same time. Just so they understand that it's due to circumstances outside of our control, but that we're, first and foremost, front of mind is doing what's right for our students.
And Absolutely, and that communication is going to be key to keeping and earning trust.
And I want to thank you
Yes.
for 60-plus presentations. I mean, and then you're still sending us text messages over the weekend. Take a breath.
After the last graduation.
Leave the country and leave your phone.
All right, trustees, unless there are any other topics, this concludes our board workshop. Thank you so much.